Welcome to a new episode of Prime Movers, where we sit down with the founders, CEOs, and inventors who are transforming billions of lives. Joining us this month is Dalan Animal Health CEO Annette Kleiser to discuss the dramatic decline in the world's bee population and how her company created the first USDA-approved vaccine for insects. Here's the full conversation. Annette, thank you so much for joining Prime Movers this month. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. To kick things off, can you talk a little bit about yourself and Dalan's origin story? Just kind of want to understand kind of where, what brought you to trying to solve this problem.
Yeah, happy to share this. I'm Annette Kleiser. I'm the CEO and founder of Dalan Animal Health, and I'm a scientist originally by background, but I left the lab a long time ago after my postdoc and went on the business side, helping for most part of my career researchers spin out their ideas either into companies or finding an existing partner, an existing company to take these ideas and make a reality out of them and make actually products that the rest of society can use and can benefit from. And one of those reviews of technologies at universities brought me to the University of Helsinki, and there was a researcher, Daria Freitag, that I ran into more or less by accident, who told me about her idea that we need to vaccinate honeybees. And I was just completely stunned because when you do this kind of work, you see amazing opportunities at research universities every single day. I mean, the creative potential is endless, but very often these are incremental improvements that are all important, but it's in areas that we know that we have to solve, like cancer or Alzheimer's, very, very critical. But often it's just small changes and not completely novel thinking. And this idea was absolutely different. And we all know how critical honeybees are to our survival for planet health, not just for us, for animals, for the environment, for climate. And particularly honeybees, we depend on them for our food security. We depend on them. They're used in agriculture. A third of the food that we eat wouldn't exist if it wasn't for honeybee pollination. And those are the most nutrient-rich foods. And they're dying. The honeybees are dying. They've been dying for decades. And here was a researcher that finally said, we can do something. We don't have to wait. And so I looked into it and I said, okay, we have to do this. So we teamed up and started the company.
Yeah, think about that. 1 in 3 bites. It's like the way you think about that. And it's everything from almonds, berries. I mean, just so many vital fruits, vegetables that are pollinated by honeybees. And I think people really need to understand that it's 75% of the world's food crops are pollinated by bees. Just I think that needs like kind of, some people tend to forget that. Can you dive into that a bit more too? Just the problem itself, problems facing honeybees, both in the US and in the EU. There's so many local issues that bees face, but just for audiences who may not be tracking this issue as much, and just for everyone's just quick disclaimer, I'm on the board of Dalan as well, so this is an issue near and dear to my heart as well, and everyone here at PML. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about the problem for those who may not know as much.
Yeah, happy to dive a little bit more deeper into it. Often when we think bees are bees and they're flying around out there and they're wild and we just take them for granted. But actually, honeybees are managed bees. They are not wild bees. They're semi-wild. They still fly around and you can't keep them in captivity. But they are put into large boxes. These are very large colonies that are used, that are cared for by professionals, by beekeepers, and they're used for large scale pollination and honey production. And they are put into fields, into large orchards that would not, where wild pollinators are just not enough to do the jobs. You can't pollinate large fields, large orchards of almonds or large fields of alfalfa with just wild pollinators. It's the large scale agriculture that we need to feed um, us and animals need also large scale honey bee populations. And around the world, there are approximately 100 million colonies that are used in agriculture. So they're dedicated for agriculture and pollination and honey production. The problem is that they typically, obviously, every animal has a lifespan, and typically you would lose like 10, maybe 15% of your colonies each year. And currently, last year in the United States, 60 to 70% of colonies died. These are And this is not uncommon around the world, that you have 40 to 70% losses. And that is way too much that the industry can handle for pollination to restock. It drives the prices up. It doesn't just drive the labor cost up for beekeepers and the revenue that they can make. It diminishes their profits, but it's also problematic for growers not having enough colonies. For example, right now, we wouldn't have a single almond without honeybees. Right now, the almond season kicks off in California. Millions of hives are put on semi-trucks and carried into the state to be placed in the almonds. We wouldn't have 80% of almonds come from around the world, come from California. It's a huge industry. It's hundreds of jobs that are connected to this. And if we don't have the bees, it completely collapses. There wouldn't be a single crop. And so we really need to do something to bring these losses down. These colony collapse is a ongoing problem, and most of these losses are actually due to diseases. It's multifactorial. Obviously, there's climate, and there is the weather can always impact the bees, and pesticides and chemicals. All of those things are true. But most of the losses, over 50%, is due to diseases. They get sick from virus diseases, bacteria diseases, just like we do, just like any other livestock, just like our pets do. And we have solutions for all these other animals, but we don't have them for honeybees. And we decided to say this has to change. We have to put these animals on the map. We can't just throw our hands up and wait 20 years. We have to do something now. And we know that vaccines and disease prevention is one of the most effective ways to manage health and manage disease in livestock operations, and they're routinely used. And so we decided, well, let's see if we can do the same thing for honeybees and develop vaccines.
Great transition. Why has it taken so long when you're looking at that constellation of threats, the mites, viruses, pesticides, everything you mentioned? Kind of why has it taken so long for vaccination to be looked at in more details? Antibiotics have been, applied, and so many other types of treatments. Just curious about uh, your research and Dahlia's research. Why now?
Right. It really required a shift in our thinking and understanding these animals and what they're capable of. It was believed. So when we think about vaccines, we think about memory and antibodies and B cells and T cells. We think about an adaptive immune system that can be trained with memory, where you have, 30 years later, you take a a bug that makes you sick, you kill it, you inactivate it, and then you expose the human or the animal to that pathogen, and it doesn't get you sick because it's dead, but you create this memory in your body that when you see the disease any time later in your life, you are protected. Your body is already prepared. And the other system that, so only 5% of organisms on this planet have an adaptive immune system. 100% of organisms on this planet, including us and bees, have an innate immune system. And the innate immune system is a first line of defense that was thought to be untrainable without a memory. So bees only have this innate immune system, and because it was conventional wisdom that they don't have antibodies, it can't be trained. Therefore, nobody would even try to develop a vaccine approach because by definition, it wouldn't work. And what Dalia's research showed and what other research showed over the last decade is that when you expose a queen bee or when you expose the queen insect to a disease, the next generation is less likely to get sick. And well, if that's true, then that means there is some sort of immune transfer or information about a disease that will, from the mother to the child, that will protect the offspring. Dahlia showed how that mechanism in the honeybee works. That was the fundamental research that I stumbled across at the University of Helsinki. And we said, well, you know, if as scientists, if this is true, then we should be able to take this and develop this into a product. And that's what we did. But it was literally that it was assumed it wouldn't work. It doesn't work. And that's not true. The innate immune system is extraordinarily powerful. And it's broad spectrum, which is an advantage. And the nice thing is in honeybees, you can actually activate it in the mother and the child is, so the queen, we only vaccinate the queen. We feed this vaccine, we put it in the feed and she takes it up, she carries it to her ovaries. And every larvae every egg that she lays will have been exposed to pieces of the vaccine. And she lays millions of eggs. I mean, it's one queen that makes this entire colony. So it's very cost effective. It's very straightforward. You don't have to take little needles and vaccinate every
Right.
single bee. You do just through the queen, and you have the entire millions of bees protected before they hatch. So they see, you know, they come out of the egg, they develop into little bees, and it doesn't matter the environment. It's similar, you know, like for us, if we go on travels, we want to make sure we are vaccinated before we go to LAX or, you know,
Oh,
Newark
yeah.
or wherever we fly out of. And we want to be prepared. And these little animals are prepared the moment they hatch and see their new hive environment.
Can we dive into the results you're seeing in the field now and how you know, explain how it's, the use of the royal jelly, how it's used in queens, but I'd love to kind of hear kind of early trial results and feedback you're getting from so many, owners of hives out there in California and across the US.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, it's one thing if so there you know there was no bee vaccine until recently, until we got it approved, and so it was very exciting working with the USDA. Animal vaccines are regulated under the USDA. Drugs are regulated under the FDA. So just so the USDA is responsible for reviewing all the clinical trials, all the safety, everything. And our product is regulated and to the same standard and has the same characteristics of any other animal vaccine. So whether it's a chicken or a cow, it doesn't matter. It has to go through this process. And so it was very exciting working with the USDA. How would you regulate and how would you develop and review, and what are the clinical trials requirements to show safety and efficacy for a bee vaccine? And all these diseases in bees, they are highly lethal. So you cannot infect animals in the wild. You can only do this in very controlled environment in the lab. So and based on these lab studies, we're in a very prescribed setting. We are infecting these 1-day-old bee larvae. They're tiny, to disease in a very high degree. We're trying to see how much can they withstand, and if you can show efficacy in these settings, that's what the regulator wants to see. They want to see in a very harsh but very controlled setting. And so we got the license, and they said, great, this is fantastic, you showed it, but now let's see how it performs in the field, where you have very little control over the pre-setting, what the hive looks like, what kind of diseases are in it, the skills of the beekeepers, the climate zones. Florida are very different from California, Washington, very different from Texas. And the vaccine has to work and perform in these different regions, in different operations. I don't know, to date, I think over 100,000 doses have been deployed in North America. And it is exciting when beekeepers call you and say, can your team come out and look at our colonies? Because obviously they try it. They have certain hives that they vaccinate. They put a vaccinated queen in and she creates the colony, and then they compare it to hives that are not vaccinated. And when they open them up and they see, yes, there is no disease, which is great. So it does protect 100%. We have not seen a single colony with this disease that
Incredible.
we are
Yeah.
protecting, which is rare by any standard. That, I mean, we all, we get the flu vaccine and then we hear it's 40%, effective, or 10% effective. Here, we haven't seen a single case, so this is really fantastic. But what the beekeepers see in addition to this is that the colonies do better. They perform better. As if it's, if you have an underlying condition, you have a flu, you just don't work as well. And when, you have a cold and, you don't want to go to work. So similar
That's the
with
thing
the
they care the
bees.
most
They
about. I mean,
just
yeah, if it impacts their productivity, keepers are going to actually care and make the investment in it. And yeah, you're right.
they see more honey, they see better brood patterns, they see stronger colonies, and that is what is really driving them to adopting the vaccination.
And then can we talk a little bit about just it? What we love so much about Dalan is the practical applications across not just bees, but shrimp and so many other insects potentially. And can you talk a little bit about the research you guys are doing in shrimp and around white spot syndrome?
Yes, yes. The when earlier I mentioned that this innate immune system is present in every single living organism. This is not something that is unique to honeybees. And when we saw that we can activate and train this innate immune system in bees, and what was surprising to us when we put it into the field, that we saw that it started protecting, or that the bees didn't get diseases, adult diseases. So it was a long lasting effect, not just a short first line of defense, but it was a long-lasting effect. And this long-lasting effect got us, and got us thinking that this is literally a trainable system with a memory component that is not as specific as the adaptive immune system, but it has a really great and strong potential to, and we're neglecting it. Modern medicine doesn't look at the innate immune system. It only looks at the adaptive. And that's when we are saying, okay, if this is true, if we can do so much in the bee, what are the other animals that are currently lacking these kind of tools? Because they fall into the same category of completely lacking an adaptive immune system. And the first animal that comes to mind in that important animal is shrimp. Shrimp are a high valued, high quality, lean, very nutritious protein source that is extremely important, and it has growing importance in feeding populations. I mean, not only do we like it in the shrimp cocktail, but there's actually a very important global component about shrimp aquaculture. However, these animals have the same problem. They're 60% losses every year because all you have are chemicals and antibiotics, and there's a problem with antibiotic use in these animals. They are consumed, and antibiotic resistance is a growing problem, and every country is trying to limit the use of antibiotics. So the vaccines are extremely important, or sustainable, effective, non-chemical solutions are really critical for the shrimp industry, and it's a huge unmet need. It's a huge gap in shrimp farming, and so we decided to set out because, from a biology perspective, shrimp are just a bee in the water. So, and shrimp farming is very similar from the honeybee industry, is that you start with a breeding pair of shrimp. Just like you have a queen bee, you have a queen shrimp. And so we vaccinate the female broodstock and mate them. They spawn, and all the 500,000 shrimp that come from this one female are protected. And again, just like with the honeybee, the diseases can hit. They're in the pond for several months, growing out until we buy the jumbo shrimp that takes 3 months to get there. And some of those viral diseases, like white spot virus, or also bacterial diseases, like some of the Vibrio diseases, highly lethal. You have a few hours to maybe 2 days that you have to do emergency harvest to get your pond, to rescue from your pond, because it can wipe out your entire harvest, your entire pond within days. And typically what shrimp farmers tell me, every other harvest is an emergency harvest. So these diseases are really huge impact, and therefore also obviously a small difference of, in efficacy, even if you just increase the production by 10%, 15%, you have a winning proposition to make in the ROI to shrimp farmers.
That's great. Well, to wrap things up, I would love to do our prime movers questionnaire here. Just a few rapid fire questions. I think founders love to hear the stories of other founders and the challenges they're overcoming. So, what's one thing that you've had to overcome as founder that you just did not expect would be ever an issue? You're dealing with so many problems every single day. Curious, what's one you're not planning you'd have to deal with as a when you started Dalan years ago?
Oh, when you do, and Prime Movers has quite a number of what makes you also very unique. A number of companies that are really tackling novel problems where they are high risk because the market is not as defined. We all know the problem. We all know how important honeybees are. The what is the economic impact? The numbers are just not as solid as in some other industries. Or what is the customer? It's such a novel product. How is the customer going to adopt it? What are the questions that they have? Typically, if your dog gets sick, you take your dog to a veterinarian who decides what medication. Here, it's the beekeeper that has to decide on these treatment options, and they've never seen anything like this. So how do you work with the beekeeper? How do you work with the industry? What is the value proposition that you that resonates the most? There is no framework. There is nothing that you can draw on. So it's whether it was on the regulatory side, on the manufacturing, nobody had ever manufactured these these pathogens. How do you deal with this? How do you who are the scientists that you have to bring together that have actually it's across the company. You need people that have deep domain expertise, but at the same time are flexible to think outside the box. And these are just very unique set of people, and to assembling them, those were, some of the things that I had to learn. I had to learn what was I looking for in people and in bringing a team together.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Anything that's you've read lately that inspires you? Anything on your nightstand that you recommend to others? I'm always curious. I always want to add to my reading list. I think many listeners enjoy the picks of our founders. Anything that you recommend?
The only thing that I really recommend, I think, unfortunately, I have very little time
I'm
for.
sure.
I'm, I'm looking forward to that once we have the company at a stage where the team is I have everybody has
After
all
the
the
next
support that they
fundraiser,
need.
that's usually the answer. Yeah.
Oh, the next fundraising. But one of the things that I really somebody recommended to me, and that I think I want to pass on to every single founder, is get a coach. Get a coach, get an executive coach early as you can afford it, to help you through this. When you are, the team will always look to the founder, to the CEO, as the one that has all the answers. And so to help through that process of being able to manage right, to manage through ambiguity, to manage changes constantly, is a coach can be extremely helpful in this. And that is, I think, one of the most important decisions that I made early on, to listen whoever gave me that advice. And it's been extremely useful because the
Yeah, it's
changes and the situations that you're confronted with every single day, yeah, like you said, it's so unpredictable that you need somebody that you can go to and say, "Hey, I have the situation. What do you think? Can I run this
yeah,
by you? Can I role play? Can I help me think through this?"
yeah, fantastic advice. And we always try to connect people to an executive coach, and we've had some amazing ones come through PML. I think it's absolutely 100% correct. To wrap things up, do you have a prediction between today and 2050? Is there one that you're the most excited about? It doesn't need to be in the bee space, but I'm always curious. So, um, the breakthrough that you're hoping that'll have the biggest impact on mankind. We did our roadmap a few years ago, tried to outline as many potential breakthroughs between today and 2050 to really help us understand where to invest. But always curious about what you're seeing and the things you think are the most important, either in your space or another that you care deeply about.
Yeah, I think it is, for me, I just had a team come back from a conference, and they weren't wearing name badges or any branding and any my colleague was saying it's like all of a sudden people were, there's the vaccine,
Maybe.
there's the bee vaccine.
Yes.
And having, it's just when we launched the vaccine, nobody knew us. We were this little company, we were completely unknown, and now people are recognizing, the industry is recognizing. Now with the shrimp vaccine, we are getting a lot of visibility and a lot of inquiries about our work. But I'm really hoping that this will be standard of care, whether it is a bee or a shrimp. But the innate immune system beyond these animals, we're looking, there are so many. Look, right now in chickens, you have to take every little chick that comes and inject it and vaccinate it, or do in-egg vaccination. This is not trivial. And if we can develop better tools where we can see this innate immune system in all the other organisms, I want, that would be my vision, that it just becomes part of our normal thinking and tools that we have, and researchers that dive into this, understand how it works, and it's going to be, yeah, standard of care across, and many new products that are being developed for many species that are looking at this part of our biology that we just, are just starting to understand.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Annette, thank you so much for joining the Prime Movers podcast this month. We really appreciate your time. Just fascinating conversation. And thank you again.
Thank you, Gavin.